please join me in welcoming poet, musician, activist, Moor Mother. We were just listening to Deadbeat Protest from your 2016 LP, Fetish Bones. And I wanted to start us off with that music so that people could get a sense of where you're coming from creatively. What can you tell us about where your head was at when you were first making that track?
Well, it was kind of simple. I'm like part of a DIY scene in Philadelphia. And I was just frustrated, you know, like after an event, just feeling like no one really cared, you know? But it was more of I think it was the start of this performative activism that now, I mean, I feel like it's always been, but as far as my life, it's been really rampant now. A lot of people are just, you know, doing activism or whatever, or giving a fuck just for the gram, you know? So it's just pissing me off in the early, is this language okay?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Whatever you want.
You know, it was making me upset. No, it's pissing me off, you know, about the state of things. And it just happens with everything, you know, happens a lot with poetry. You write something that seems to be about a little small situation you're dealing with in your scene, but it reflects on this, you know, greater picture of what's happening in the world. And I was just, that's just really what happened, you know.
So when was it actually written?
Maybe like 2014 or 15.
One of the things that I'm really interested in that song is that you cram so much information into basically like a minute and 23 seconds.
Yeah.
Did it take a lot of revisions to get to the point where you felt like the message was exactly what you wanted it to be? Or were you rolling with something that was more improvisational from the outset?
No, the words were already there. The words are the easy part. The hard part is like, can I sing this right? Can I get a decent recording of me performing this correctly in my bedroom, you know? So it was a lot of like, maybe I took about 3 takes to get it right, and I still wasn't really happy, you know, but it was like the deadline's coming, I gotta get this done, you know? So, yeah, it wasn't for a while that I listened to the album and I was like, fuck, this is good, you know? Before I was like, ugh, I'm not singing this correctly, I don't, ugh. You know, all the shortcomings that come along with your process. You know, I was focusing on a lot of that. But the words, that's simple, you know? I love punk, so like, there's so many punk songs, especially by Bad Brains, you know, where they just repeat certain things over and over again, but I'm like, oh, you know, I got that attitude. Yes, I feel this is like, you know.
It's like Bad Brains or the Minutemen, too. When we're talking about people who can just fit something into a minute long, but there's so much information. And did that desire for brevity come from punk originally, too?
Yeah, to get all the information in a short amount of time, you know? Yeah, for sure.
And one of the things about Deadbeat Protest that is also really interesting is that I introduced you as a poet and a musician and an activist, but I think all 3 of those really coalesce in what this song is saying and how it's being delivered.
Yeah, I mean, I think I get this activism thing because I just care, you know what I mean? Like, I give a shit. So it's like, whoa, this is activism, you know? But it's like, what are other people doing? I don't understand why this was so hard, you know? I was just had a show recently, and one of the curators was like, yeah, your music's a bit difficult to get into.
That was from a curator.
Yeah. And then so I was on stage and I was just like, difficult? You know, it sounded like a poem, but I was like, what you mean difficult? You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I'm doing some fantasy. What do you mean? People are getting shot. Like, how, I don't, yeah, it's like, it's happening every day. So why all of a sudden when I come on stage, it's intense and difficult. Like, what are y'all watching? What are y'all listening to? Like, why is this some like radical thing that's happening? You know?
I don't think activism has to be a dirty word either, but
No, I don't think
quite
it's a
rare
dirty
in
word,
music.
but it's just right now it's a buzzword. Anyone can, you can be like, I participate in self-care. I'm a radical activist. You know, like, you know, so they kind of like take things and squeeze it, and then I'm just hanging with this like empty lemon or something, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't need a label to like care and want to be invested in my community and want to be, you know, have some compassion about what people are going through. It's not like it's just my one friend. It's a whole world situation, you know? So I try to think about situations that are happening all over the world that no one is talking about, i.e. domestic violence.
When you talk about your community too, what community did you come from initially? What can you tell us about the community where you grew up?
Oh, in Aberdeen. I grew up in Aberdeen, a small town in Maryland. There's a place called Washington Park where I spent my early high school, you know, everything up until about 11th grade. And it was a community where everyone just did for themselves, you know? Like, we couldn't get food deliveries to come because everyone was always like robbing the pizza man and stuff like this, which was funny to us. It wasn't like, oh, this is dangerous. It was like, whatever, it's pizza guy, you know what I mean? Who cares? Or it's taxi, like, run out of there, you know what I mean? So we had our own taxi. We had people that had stores in their closets. We had candy ladies. We had a guy that fixed bikes, you know? So it was really no need to like leave, and it was no need to feel like we didn't have anything, you know? So I didn't grow up like, oh, so poor, oh, drugs, you know? It was like a utopia. It was beautiful, you know? So like people from that community were always in communication. We're always saying like Washington Park for life, you know? Like it was a very important thing that I haven't seen anywhere else, you know? Because so many people are being pushed out, so many people are being evicted, so many condos. It's like the condo revolution, you know? Soon you'll all have a condo, probably. And that's just the reality of it, you know? It's really beautiful.
And did you take that sort of self-sufficient philosophy into your work when you were starting to enter DIY communities as a musician as well?
Yeah, I mean, that has influenced my entire work, living in Washington Park, you know? I was talking about wanting to tap dance. And instead of having the idea of being like, Mom, could I get tap dancing shoes? You know, me and my sister was like, we gotta get all these bottle caps and we gotta put them on our shoes, and this is how, you know, like, just that thing of being like, if you wanna do something, find a way to create it, you know? So, I mean, when I moved to Philadelphia, I was thinking that I was just gonna study and be this photographer and not get into this crazy thing, music, you know? But it just found me, and, you know, they kicked me out of school, and this is what I do, you know?
I do want to talk about Philadelphia eventually, but yeah. I'm curious to hear what the musical diet was like in your actual household, because I know that your father was in like a couple of choirs at the church locally.
Yeah, very like what you would call like spooky gospel music, you know, where you're like, wow, are now ghosts entering the room? You know what I mean? Kind of stuff, not like the R&B kind of gospel, which is like popular now because of like, you have so many R&B musicians that are making gospel records. For instance, like a Mary Mary, you know. I don't know if anyone listens to gospel here, but it's very like R&B, you know, from where it came from, of being like spirituals and ways of singing prayer, you know, to gather around each other. It's all about like healing, not, you know. So yeah, a lot of gospel, a lot of R&B, but not the R&B that you folks know, not like Destiny's Child and stuff like that. R&B like Patti LaBelle and Stephanie Mills and, James Brown and, stuff like that, real crunchy and dirty and,
When did punk enter the picture, though? If you're going from gospel like Mahalia Jackson and James Brown, and then you're getting into Bad Brains eventually, how did that go down?
Well, I was also big into hip-hop, Public Enemy, MC Lyte, a lot of stuff like that. And then hip-hop changed to being a lot more dancey, like MC Hammer and CNC Music Factory and all of this stuff, which is cool. I'm not against that, but I still had this hunger for this type of hip-hop that was speaking about the stuff that I was seeing in my neighborhood and growing up. So I just searched. I just was searching, asking kids in school, what are you listening to? And then I found Bob Marley. And then I was like, whoa, this is really different. This is kind of punk, And from Bob Marley, I found punk. So stuff like early Nirvana, what else kind of, Operation Ivy. I loved that group when I was, starting out in punk. And just stuff about communities coming together, dealing with racism, stuff like that, kind of punk.
Did it feel like this omnivorous music taste was more of the norm where you grew up, or were people sort of slotting into very specific areas?
No one was listening to this in my neighborhood. And I bought a pair of those Jinkos, those pants? I mean, this is Berlin. I'm sure everyone has a pair on right now or something. But it's probably not. Yeah, and I remember the kids being like, what are those pants, Kame? You're from Washington Park. But that helped me being from this neighborhood because I was already cool. So I didn't have to really do anything, and my brothers and sisters were all cool. They were so cool. So I had that kind of thing where I could do this, or people would be like, it's okay, you're just going through a phase, you'll be back, kind of thing like that. But not in a way of disowning me, because I'm from Washington Park, you know what I mean? You can't. There's no getting rid of me in this kind of way. It's just okay, you're doing your thing, you'll come back around. But now people see me and they're like, you were always weird, I'm glad you stuck to it. You know what I mean? I'm glad you're doing your thing, so that's cool.
Could we play video number 4, please? So that was a video from the Fight the Power live VHS from 1989.
I gotta get that VHS.
Were you at that tour?
I went to that tour. That changed my world. When Terminator X was put up your fists, I'm from Maryland, so I went to Baltimore to see concerts. And oh my goodness, I've never seen anything like that. It was all these black people with their fists up, and I was just with my little fists, and I was just oh.
How old were you then, little fist?
I don't know, but I know my little fist, it was little. It was little, but it was strong. I've never been that young and felt so strong in my life,
How important were Public Enemy to you, not just from that experience, but in general, musically, lyrically, politically, to what you're doing today?
Everything, just being to tell the truth in this way. I mean, they had this line where they were fuck Elvis, So I'm coming from Washington Park. I hated Elvis. I hated anyone like Elvis, So, and John Wayne, I hated cowboys, So I'm this is the truth. This is allowing me to walk around with, a crown on my head, or just this power, to be motivated, to be okay, no matter what someone from the outside is telling you that you're lacking or you're living in some type of poverty or drug-infested area, It was nothing about us, It's just confidence. Confidence.
There was also a quote in that video where he says, Armageddon has been in effect. And I feel like that connects really strongly to Sun Ra.
Yeah.
It's after the end of the world. Don't You Know That Yet?
Yeah.
And these are two people amongst very many others whose philosophies and music would come to be grouped under Afrofuturism. Was this sense of Afrofuturism already seeping into your awareness early on in this music?
I mean, that's more of a kind of like an academic framing, but the idea that is Afrofuturism has already been. So Public Enemy is not like a start of anything. They're all coming from this history that is so rich of, whether you want to call it African American classical music or Black classical music, this is all a part of a history. So that's why you see Flavor Flav bugging out because Shaka Khan is right there. We just played Pitchfork Fest with Irreversible Entanglements, and Shaka Khan was on there, and we were on the side stage freaking out because it's a history. Mahalia Jackson, all of these people, you have to study this to understand like the richness of what you're doing. You're not alone. So many people have been speaking this, idea. Or when they think about Afrofuturism and they talk about Sun Ra as if the Dogon tribe never existed, or these places, these indigenous ideas of the future never existed, like what they call Galileo or whoever is the first astronomer, that's crap, What? The ferryman is the first astronomer, but you got to do the history to understand how rich the information is been provided by you. For you, I mean.
Personally, when did you start becoming more aware of that history in the way that you've just described?
Afrofuturism? When I moved to Philadelphia, I'm not good with years, you know what I mean? I did this event, Wine, Spirit, and Mind, that the Afrofuturist Affair put on, this organization in Philadelphia. My partner, Rashida Phillips, organized, and performed at that, and then started learning more, performed that. There's a charity ball, the Afrofuturist Affair Costume and Charity Ball, performed that. I was already a curator in Philly, and I had been tapping in these artists to perform that were under the umbrella of Afrofuturism, but they didn't know it, it was just like what they were making,
I feel like we skipped some time there. How did you end up in Philly in the first place?
I went to school to study photography at the Art Institute, and
Why photography?
Good question. I mean, when high school's over, and then everyone's like going to college, I was like, oh, better get out of here. What could I do? I'm like, well, I like Gordon Parks, I like photography, so let me try that out. Not like I was a photographer before. I don't even have many baby pictures. No one was really taking pictures, when I was young. So I just thought it was beautiful to document what was going on in communities,
And at the time that you moved to Philadelphia, you wouldn't have considered yourself a musician already at that point?
Well, a rapper. Yeah, I would say I'm a rapper. And that's what happened at the Art Institute. There was a party, and there was a cipher. And there was a young woman that got in the cipher, and I was like, oh, well, then I got to get in here. And then that's where I changed my life pretty much. Got in the cipher. She was like, that's good. I was like, you're cool. And then we just started meeting up in, the dorms, rapping over like Tribe Called Quest albums and being like, hey, let's do this. And then I was like, I really like punk too. Let me turn you on to this. And then we were just like this hip-hop duo called The Docs, and then to Paradox, but there was some German band called The Paradox, and we were so pissed. We were like, Germans, how do they get this name? Because we thought we created it and no one else had it, so. Yeah, and then so slowly but surely, we got a band. And then that was the Mighty Paradox.
How aware had you been of Philadelphia's musical legacy at the point when you'd arrived?
Well,
people like Billie Holiday, born in Philadelphia, people like Sun Ra, living there for his entire life.
Yeah, well, I didn't know anything about Sun Ra yet, but I knew Patti LaBelle. and I knew like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or Will Smith and all of that, DJ Jazzy Jeff, hip hop in that way, but I didn't know exactly what it was like musically, you know, or that's why when I came there, I was like, I'm just gonna be a school kid, you know? So, but then of course I would come to Philadelphia and organize like I did because the foundation was there, you know, of Sun Ra playing open in the parks and stuff like that, so.
At what point did you become more aware of the history of activism in Philadelphia as well, and how it was integrating with music, and how might you have taken that into the things that you ended up doing there?
Well, the first thing that I got into in Philadelphia was gathered around this bombing that happened to the MOVE organization in Philadelphia. It happened in the 80s, but when I got there, there were 9 members in prison. So it was a lot of organizing around awareness of that and helping to release these people that were locked up. One of the, you know, more popular person that people know in the world is Mumia.
Just for reference, there were 9 people in prison for a cop who had gotten shot, but he got shot by 1 bullet, and they had terms of 100 years each.
Yeah, and the police in Philadelphia dropped the bomb on their house. So this is the first time that people have seen on the news the police force dropping a bomb. Usually that's saved for the military. So it was really crazy. There's actually a really good documentary, and the guy's name, the mayor, was Rizzo. And we have a statue of him in Philadelphia that people put panties on every so often. That's about as far as we got. I don't understand why it hasn't been pushed over or something, you know, but I forget.
When you first moved there, were you already aware of all of what had been happening with organizations like MOVE? How did that enter your consciousness in the city itself?
They took it to the street. So, you know, as a kid, as a musician, I was able to see this and be like, that's fucked. What can I do, you know? What can I participate in? And also, we had this reptilian in office, Bush. So that was like, you know, heavy protests in Philly, and of course I'm gonna be there. You know, it was not even a discussion or like, yeah, it's no discussion, it's just like you see it, you have some sort of emotional response to it, and you make a decision, and then you get involved, you know? So, you know, that was to me, the end of the golden era from where I'm from of a protest, you know, because that was like, that was almost like we were coming out for war, you know? It wasn't like we were just walking around with signs and having little chants. No, we had gas masks on. We covered our faces. Like, we were there to, you know, start some trouble, to aggravate the system, you know?
And was the majority of Philadelphia's musical communities active in what you're talking about? Or did it feel like it was confined to a very particular group of people doing a particular thing?
Yeah, I mean, because the only people I knew were the college kids, you know? So we were all like MCs, you know? So we wouldn't walk around and we could say we rapped and we would participate in ciphers, but we wasn't like, we're musicians, we're a part of a scene. We were just trying to build ourselves up to figure out what can we even do. You know what I mean? As so-called rappers and writers. So, yeah, it was all like early works in progress. It wasn't really like groups that I can name that were involved in the protests that I know. When I came, the Roots were the band The Roots were like the biggest thing from Philadelphia. And so they had an event called Black Lily. That's where Jill Scott and Floetry and Music Soul Child, all of these kind of people started. And we would sneak in to get in on the open mic. And that was the first time I performed in Philadelphia. And my song was Nowadays Is All About the Pussy. And so I did that at this neo soul club. And they were like, what is wow? You know, they were like, nowadays it's all about the pussy. You know, they were just Like, you shook something up. That was really cool. So I just kept going back and doing whatever I could just to be a part of it. But I wasn't in the door, you know? I wasn't that cool or known or popular to, like, you know, try to collaborate with the Roots or anyone, you know? It's just like a dirty kid that could rap, you know?
But you did have your own event series at one point, right?
Oh, yeah. So once I got the band, all of our stuff was pretty political. We couldn't find venues for that because neo soul was what was happening in Philly. So just started an event called, well, it was first called The Mashup, and then that venue closed, and then we called it Rockers. And I did that for 10 years every Wednesday.
Every week?
I mean, yeah, it was like, yeah. Then it went to a monthly, and yeah, and then Rockers was like the coolest scene. You know, it was like they had the underground punk scene, but we were like underground from that. So it was like, ugh, it was beautiful.
How exhausted were you after 10 years of doing a weekly party?
I mean, you hear some of the songs. Well, just because, you know, there's two ways to do things. You can do things like the Penn University Donald Trump model, which is like you have an idea, you create a business, you get money. You know, my way was just like, we need a place to play. Oh, these other groups need a place to play. Let's just do it. So I never really made any money or even thought about that to the end. Like, damn, I probably could have had some money. Or, you know what I mean? Or got paid from this. I did all of this, and I have nothing material-wise. But what I have actually is all of these musicians that were playing Rockers are now like amazing and touring the world and really had a chance to develop their voice, just like I was using it to develop my own voice, you know? So it was kind of like that.
How did you find your voice developing over that time? A
Well,
lot can happen in 10 years.
Yeah, when I was doing the Black Lily, I would just rap like this. You know, saying a lot of stuff, but I couldn't move outside of that because I probably would be trembling and, you know, so it went from that to stage diving, you know, just getting more free, basically free.
Could we play video number 5, please? So that was The Mighty Paradox,
Yeah.
the band that you were talking about. Another song that's maybe less than a minute, but with a lot of information crammed into it.
Yeah, I mean, there was a so-called natural disaster, which was called Hurricane Katrina. And the only relief, when I was writing this, I was like, the only relief was a 40-ounce hurricane. You know, no other relief had came to aid, you know, these people after this, you know, so-called natural disaster.
There were, I think, 5 people in that band?
Yeah, 5 people, yeah.
And you were also in another band where you girls dressed as girls?
Yeah.
When-
That came a little later.
When did you start to think that there were things you wanted to explore as a solo artist that you had to do separately from what you were getting out of these groups?
Well, because it was 5 people, we had to decide a time to meet, talk about the songs, go over all of this stuff, and I was just like, in the meantime, I want to make music, you know? So I just figured to save up to get this iPad so I can work alone. And I was just thinking of trying to make beats like Jay Dilla. That was just like, I'm just make some beats, you know? But they were not like Jay Dilla, even though I was like, this one kind of sounds like something Jay Dilla would do, you know? And I think the inspiration came with the soul samples that he would use, you know, was like what I could relate to. And there was so many of these, you know, I'm into hip hop now, into punk, but there were so many of these soul and blues artists that inspired me. So I wanted to like tap into that memory and make an archive of all of this stuff that I love that had really nothing to do with, you know, like I can't sample Whitney Houston while we're playing The Mighty Paradox, you know what I mean? Or just things that little loops, things that I loved. So I just went crazy and made like maybe 2 or 3 beats a day. And then it got to be like a lot of them, you know, so.
Let's listen to one of them. This is Programma from Sleep Study.
Well, Programma came a bit later.
Bit later.
So
but still made on an iPad.
Yes.
All right.
And in bed and on earplugs.
Let's play and we can talk a little bit more about the iPad because I am curious about that. So this is Programma from Sleep Study 1 and 2. So that was Programma from Sleep Study 1 and 2. The thing I'm really interested in about the iPad is that I feel like when you're learning how to play guitar or bass or drums, people are always going to have some other artist that they'll reference. Like if you're learning guitar, you have to go check out this person. Or bass, you have to go check out this person. But an iPad, there's not really something that you have to measure yourself against. Did it feel more free for that reason? I mean, maybe King Britt in Philadelphia uses an iPad.
Yeah, well, I mean, I never check for people to like, because the people that I like, I can't do. Like, I like Aretha Franklin. I can't do Aretha Franklin. So I'm like, I'm checking, you know, Alice Cole, I'm checking for people things that I can't do, you know? But what's interesting about sleep study is when I started getting into these different like little like ideas of sleep studies, basically making music in bed while everyone's asleep and not waking up anyone. So you make the beat, you make the words, you do it all right there. That's just a fun little thing for me, I guess. I don't know how that is even an example for anyone to be like, okay, let me make some music in the flats, see if I can not wake anyone, but still bring this passion and still like, you know, be aggressive in this way. So after I had made all these like hundreds and hundreds of beats, I was like, what little quirky things can I do to like push myself in difficult situations with the iPad?
What were some of the other ones?
So long ago. What was another one? That's terrible. I would have to look at my little SoundCloud from back in the day. But just limitations outside, walking to work. What albums can you make? You know, what's that sound like? Making a couple of songs on your way to work with the cars and everything's going on. Can you actually rap and, you know, out loud? What, you know, all of these different kind of things, because every time I would make something on the iPad, I would learn something. So how that one stops, for a while, I didn't even understand how to fade out. So it was just like all these abrupt, like, it's over. Take the drum, You know, kind of like an MPC, just take the drum out. So, yeah, it was all really organic. You know, like I said, the first idea was to try to make some stuff like J Dilla, once I realized that's not gonna happen, and just accept whatever I was making, you know?
And when you're making a song like that, am I right in assuming it starts as a poem and then you're translating it into this soundscape, sonic world?
Yeah, well, yeah, and sometimes I have the beat, and then I'm like the first sleep study, it's just me making up stuff, like what you call a freestyle, which then I learned is really difficult because I couldn't do it live. So I was recording all this stuff, but I didn't understand how to perform it live. So my live show was totally different of songs that I could do live. You know, that's the first record, Fetish Bones. You know, so it was kind of, I was playing like 2 different worlds sonically.
Talking about Fetish Bones a bit, there's so many different samples and references floating throughout that record, and we'll play some music from it soon. But I was curious to hear what your approach is when you're sampling, and what sort of philosophical weight might need to be a part of something you're sampling, in addition to the actual sonic element of it.
It's all stuff for archive. It's all stuff that's been haunting me. Stuff that I was scared of as a kid that now I can't get enough of, like Mahalia Jackson. When I was a kid, I was like, I better not mess up around whenever Mahalia Jackson songs are on. Just like, this is so intense to me. It's more of stuff that's, that reminds me of my family growing up. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about this later, but to me, music's a form of sound, is a form of time travel. So of me being able to tap into all of this stuff that I grew up with, all of these sounds that I have fallen in love with, and to be able to always access that. So I can always go back to some samples or something that is part of me growing up, part of my life.
Let's listen to something from Fetish Bones,
okay.
Another thing. This is Creation Myth from Fetish Bones in 2016. So that was Creation Myth from Fetish Bones, and there's a lot going on there, but I'm curious to hear you describe this track and what you were trying to accomplish with it, sonically and narratively.
Well, it all came together not as a plan. I made the soundscape because I was thinking of this idea of sound from the beginning of the world, of the universe being created. I said, okay, what does it start with? So the soundscape was its separate thing. Then I had wrote a poem. I tried to be a part of this, I'm a part of the collective now, but there's a collective called Metro Polarity in Philadelphia, and they do like a sci-fi zine. And I had submitted a poem, and it didn't make it, even though they were my friends. They were like, ugh, wasn't good enough. So I wrote another piece, and this was the piece, and they accepted it, and I really liked it. So I'm making the album, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put this on there. I'll just read this poem on top of it. There's the little song in the beginning was how I would set a cappella. I would do that to start my shows. And I'm actually going to do it at my next show. I kind of forgot about doing that. So so it all came together, and even listening to the recording, I hear this one word I made a mistake on. It's pilgrim, and I was like, pilgrim, or whatever. And I was like, ugh. I don't got no, it's like the deadline's coming. I was just like, okay, I'm satisfied with it as much as I can be, on an honest level of speaking about this. So it kind of just came together of me just putting pieces together, because that's basically how the album came together. It was like, okay, this is what I do for my live set. What is good enough to make it on this vinyl record? And that I can perform, because I'm also recording myself for the first time right after I bought studio equipment for the first time to set it up. So it's not like it's just like, buy the equipment, this is what I think I need, set it up, okay, here's the mic, do it, So it was all like experimental in this creation. So and that's just how, like I spoke about earlier, how poetry works. You have this idea in your head, and it continues to reflect. But with the poem, I wanted to write about race riots throughout time in America. And so that's what I basically did. So I start from, we just heard the song, and I'm like, what's the first line? Something about 1866, and I bled through the summer being slaughtered by whites. So what I'm talking about, 1866 to 1919, is it's like what do they call it? Like the blood summer, basically, of all of these riots happening. So it's like this blood summer, being bled through the summer, because there was so many killings and mass killings of black people in America. So that's why they call it Blood Summer, Red Summer. And that's why I kind of put that there. And then I talk about everywhere, from Oakland to Crown Heights to Jasper, Texas. It's really mainly due to the research. The research is the most important thing with that poem,
And the narrator, like you said, is moving through all these different timelines. Mm-hmm. And that was something that you mentioned earlier about your work with Rashida and collapsing these different timelines. Can you talk a little bit about, first of all, who Rashida is? You mentioned her in brief, and what the Black Quantum Futurism philosophy that you two practice is and how it manifests in your work.
Okay, that's okay. So, like I said, I did this event called Rockers in Philadelphia, and it really started to be a hub for creative weirdos, creative geniuses that would start to come. And Rashida would come to see my band, The Mighty Paradox, and, you know, we became friends. And Rashida, you know, was working with this thing called the Afrofuturism Affair, and asked me to help to perform, but also to help curate some artists, because I had already been working with such rich artists in Philadelphia that were outside the box, you know. So we started in that way, and then Rashida Phillips wrote a book of time travel short stories and asked me to make a soundtrack for it. And that was pretty much the first project that we did together, and it was really successful. So we just continued to work together, and then Rashida wrote a theory, which is Black Quantum Futurism. And I created all the sound work, and I also wrote essays for it and poetry for it, and we created some zines. Actually have some, we have like sunrise zines, we have zines on non-locality, we have zines on ritual causality, you know, and then that worked to the book, which is Black Quantum Futurism, Theory and Practice, Volume 1, and the second book is From the Congo to the Carolinas, really thinking about temporality on a slave ship, on the plantation, you know. Yeah, so it's really powerful stuff. It definitely comes out of Afrofuturism, but it's this idea of reinventing technology and redefining who gets to speak about what, you know? Rashida Phillips is a practicing attorney in Philadelphia, and I was, you know, a coach of sports, you know? So it's like, are we allowed to think about temporality? Are we allowed to think about our future? Are we allowed to participate in anything we want? Physics, mathematics, you know, do we actually need to have these degrees? You know, what is actually, you know, redefining what technology is, you know?
What is technology?
Technology is anything you want it to be, you know? I always speak about technology, you know, a liberation technology being Alice Coltrane playing the sitar, or, you know, just very, very natural things that they tell us is not enough, you know, of technology being like these degrees from these universities and these computers and all of this stuff that's not accessible, you know. But what we find out once you do the work and study history, that, you know, Apple or Microsoft didn't invent the first computer. You know, or these kind of things are ideas of what the computer was, or ideas of travel. You know, it kind of speaks a lot to this idea of the savage and the civilized. You know, well, our boat looks like this. What were the, you know, like, you couldn't have a boat, you were savage, you know, but understanding the history of, like, people of all, especially from the African continent, were explorers. They traveled the world, you know? It's not like we had to wait for some Englishman to come with a boat to be like, oh, we're seeing another country. You know what I mean? It's just like this idea of who is defining what is technology and who's holding the power behind that.
And history not just moving forward inexorably, but moving backwards and jumping around.
Yeah, it's moving forward because of propaganda. I mean, you would think everything in America, you would think that your life started from coming off of a so-called slave ship, or the time of Jesus, or anything that they, you know, put out as propaganda for us to believe where we came from. And
how does this manifest in your personal musical work, in addition to that with Rashida? Because music is something that is quite often locked into this linear timeline. Not just when you're playing something, you know, you strum a guitar, it makes a sound. You press a key, it makes a sound. That's linear. And then songs are also, most often, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and an end, and it's all very nice and tidy. So how does the work that you do and the work with Rashida subvert that?
But that's propaganda as a start, a middle, and an end. That's what's driving everyone to be like, we gotta, you know, kill each other or screw each other over because there's gonna be this ball of fire from the sky if we don't have our picket fence in our house by this time, if we're not married by this time. Like, all of that is bullshit. You know, things come around. How can I make a song without paying respect to who came before me? And I think, you know, I'm not walking around like, I'm the first one to talk about a protest. Like, am I crazy? No, like, there's so many people that lay down this foundation. How could I forget? How could I act like I'm starting something new or something, you know? That's just, you know, how some people grow up. Some people, you know, I didn't grow up in that way to cut off what came before me. So I naturally was moving in more of a circle as far as my ideas of time, you know? So, yeah, that's just my music, you know? You know, everything is the now, you know what I mean? So many things that are happening and returning, so.
I think someone else who might have been traveling that same circle was Octavia Butler, the writer. And I'd like to play something from a release you did with Rashida that also uses the words of Octavia Butler. This is the Autonomy of Shori. Do you want to introduce it, or do you want to talk about it afterwards?
You know, I've made so much music, you know, I would have to hear it.
Let's listen to it then.
I made it. I'm definitely sure I made it, but I'm like...
Okay, this is the Autonomy of Shori. So that was the Autonomy of Shori. Did it jog your memory a bit?
Oh, yeah.
What can you tell us about that release and why Octavia Butler is credited on it as well?
Well, because Rashida and I were reading from one of Octavia Butler's books. We have every one of them. And
this is Fledgling?
Yes. So that was kind of like really random how it came. I had this little thing I was singing. Then I was like, oh, it'd be cool for you to read some of this. Let's read some together, like a little conversation behind it. And yeah, so whenever I listen to it, I'm like, is that me reading? Is that you reading? You know, it was kind of really natural how it came, you know, and then I got the Pharrell sample at the end, which I put on there because that track in particular was one of those kind of archival tracks that I was speaking about earlier that just like makes me feel good. It has all these sounds that hits all the triggers within me. So I'm like, which y'all don't know because you don't know all the samples. But yeah, so it was, more like archival, I mean, which further led to us making the full project, sampling different audio books of Octavia Butler and, you know, putting little soundscapes behind them. But Octavia, the most important thing for me that I get from, well, two things. The first book I read as a serious reader was Kindred. I recommend everyone should read this book by Octavia Butler. And then the idea of visualizing and writing down what you want for your life and how powerful that can be. You know, so Octavia Butler, you know, the early stages of her career wrote about she wants to be one of the great novelists of the world and all of this, and all of this stuff came true for her, you know? So I actually did one also. I mean, I do it all the time, but I did one at the beginning of, you know, before Fetish Bones came out. And everything that I wrote down came true besides one thing. And it's just like this, you know, motivation, you know, to be like, whatever you see and you dream about, you can have these things. you know?
Could that one thing still come true, though?
Well, I mean, it actually did come true, but I just couldn't go at the time. It was just to play anywhere on the continent of Africa, basically. It was like anywhere. And I was invited to go to Sierra Leone to work on some music with an artist, but my schedule was so crazy that I couldn't make it. But I know that it's coming, so I don't even like sweat it, you know?
You mentioned your schedule there. You must be on the road 150 days a year now. How do you stay creative during that time? And how do you allow yourself to stay creative without thinking, I need to be productive creative?
It's so hard. It's crazy hard, you know? I didn't understand the idea of touring and taking some time off, because as a musician, that's my job, you know? So if I want some money, I do a show, you know? So, yeah, it's hard. I'm supposed to be finishing my second album, well, my third solo album now, and I'm like, I'm stressed about it, you know? Like, there's no other way to look at it but saying I'm stressed about it. And because I only have a certain amount of times to go home, and I'm building up laundry from touring, and I got a cat, you know? It's so much, you know? But regardless, it's gonna get done. But I wanna do like 3 albums at once. So like, how am I gonna do that? And I'm also a visual artist, so I do gallery shows. I'm also, I'm writing a play that's gonna go up in Philadelphia next year in June. You know, so I do workshops, like I do a lot of different things, and I'm in 5 groups or something.
I was gonna ask if collaboration and all of your collaborations make this easier or harder. I mean, you had just this year a release with DJ Harem, 700 Bliss, Irreversible Entanglements, you've played with The Bug, you're playing with
Zono, I gotta do that stuff.
You're playing with Roscoe Mitchell.
Yeah.
I mean, so why, what do you get out of collaboration that makes you want to keep entering into these situations? Not that it's a negative thing, but I mean, there must be something that makes it really valuable to you that you're still chasing.
I think I'm obsessed with it, you know? Because even I said I can't do any more collaborations, I gotta do my own thing. Just 2 weeks ago, I'm like, there's a rapper from New York named Ulysses, and I'm like, we gotta do an album. So we're gonna do an album that's gonna come out. What's the other project? Oh, this is kind of top secret, but this artist that I really admire, I've got to do something with him. So that's added.
They're gonna remain top secret.
Yeah, because it has to happen first. But so now that's like 7.
What do you think makes for a good collaboration separate from the actual musical result? What are traits that you look for in collaborators that might be different from what you hear on the surface of their music?
It's all been organic. All the collaborations have been organic besides these last 2. Well, even that's been organic. Well, the last artist in particular, his music speaks to me in a whole different level, in a level of reminding me of home. So it's like I gotta do a project with him. But everything is like natural, like with 700 Bliss or Irreversible, we got together to do an event on police brutality. It wasn't like this was gonna be a collaboration. And then they were like, hey, let's go into the studio for like 6 hours and see what happens. And I was just reading from my book. And then all of a sudden it's an album, you know? And then after the recording, I said, and this was right before Fetish Bones came out, I was like, all I wanna do is play a jazz festival in Spain. Like, that's all I wanna do from this project. You know, like, what? Why was that my goal? But that was my goal. And then it turns out I had played in Spain like 5 times before Irreversible even came out. So it was like, I wasn't, you know, it was just like, this is natural, we're all friends. Of course we're gonna get together and do something. You know, kind of like how doctors are like hold this heart while I cut this brain out, or whatever. It's just like we're collaborating.
I've totally been in that situation.
Yeah, it's like we're collaborating on this body, but it's kind of like we're all in the hospital. We're bound to cut something open together, kind of thing.
Well, there are a lot of people in this room who have been collaborating with each other over the last
that's cool.
week and will continue to do so in the future. Do you have recommendations for how to sustain a healthy collaboration? How to make sure that everyone's voice is getting heard, everyone is satisfied? You know, like you said, you have 7, probably more to come.
Yeah, I think it's about trying to get to know each other. I know it's like a short time or however so many weeks, but it's like when you have an understanding of what someone else likes and is coming from, or their passions or desires, then you're like 700 Bliss, for instance. I'm like, well, I know you like this kind of sound. Let's put that in there. And then I have this idea about this sound. Let's put that in there. What do you think's, you know, just like trying to put each other into the music versus like pulling ideas from the sky or however other people do, you know? It's just like, what are you into? Let's honestly include our interests in this so we're all being heard, you know? But I'm very much in like idea man, you know? So I'm like, I have a lot of ideas. That's an issue for me. Because I'm like, oh, you're a tuba player? Yo, come here. Guess what we could do? Like, you know what I mean? It's just, you know, just going through ideas and trying things out, you know, but definitely like not putting one part of someone's story or feeling like my story is more important than what you would have to say, you know. It has to be like a communication, and also music styles that you all like, you know, to be added in there. If you're just like, I like hip hop and jazz and I like blues and folk, like all of that should be represented in the music.
You've mentioned them a couple of times, and I think it's important for us to actually talk a little bit more about Irreversible Entanglements. You know, the group came together at an event against police brutality. Who are the people in Irreversible Entanglements, and what sort of creative itch is that particular group scratching?
We're all in the tradition. So Kier's on sax, Luke Stewart's on bass, Shashir's on drums, Aquiles on trumpet, and then I'm the poet. We all study music, so it's really easy. You know, like we don't have to sit around and be like, or I mean, of course, there's so many albums. There's like, hey, check out this John Coltrane album, or you know, this recording. We do that a lot, but everyone has listened to so much stuff. So I find myself really learning more because they all went to school for music. So yeah, I'm lucky in that way. If everyone is like, they know their history, they know where this music came from. We're not coming into any place like, this is our brand of jazz or anything, you know? No, we're playing improv, we're playing hard, you know, from the information that we've done the research on, you know? So it's kind of like, we're very well informed kind of style.
I don't think you need to go to music school to have stuff to share with musicians, though.
Well, I mean, these cats know a lot of stuff that I missed out on, straight up, you know? School's cool. This kind of camp, all of this stuff is cool because you're never done learning. You know, there's so much stuff that I want to learn, like every instrument. Where do you go to learn that? You know, my ears are always open. I'm always hungry to like exchange information, but by no means do I feel like I got to go to some person who's a celebrity or whatever. Like, I see everyone as having information, you know, that could be added to something, you know?
But what information do you think you have? Because all these people are obviously wanting to work with you.
Oh.
There's clearly something there.
Oh, yeah. By no means am I thinking that I'm, like, not good. Like, I'm a fucking great poet. You know, I'm really good with words because I've lived this particular kind of just upbringing that most people in this time that I meet have not experienced. A lot of people are living this isolated existence where they're so far from their culture or from people that look like them. So they're like, oh, you know, really excited when they get a chance to be around something that's, you know, related to their history. You know, I grew up around that. I have it like all in my head and my heart, you know? So it's really easy for me to pull from all of this stuff that is reflected throughout the world.
Well, let's listen to some of Irreversible Entanglements.
Okay, cool.
This is an excerpt of Fireworks. So that was Fireworks. It was just an excerpt. If you haven't heard the entire album, it's hugely recommended. We've talked a lot in this lecture about time and collapsing timelines and your time in different places. But I wanted to end by asking you, what do you think makes music timeless?
I think what makes music timeless, I guess, would be what else is it being used for, you know? That's why I feel like jazz and blues and gospel are so important to me, because they were not just used for you to tap your foot, or the artists that I like. There are some jazz musicians that just want you to tap your foot, you know? But it was not just used as that, it was used as a form of liberation. That's why I called, you know, jazz and gospel and blues liberation technologies, because they're not just for the tapping, you know, it's not just for that, it's way more. It's like gospel also was a form of coding, secret coding. You know, it was also a form of, you know, respecting the dead, or, you know, a way to be with someone that's sick. You know, it's just like all of these different ways that this sound was used to heal, you know, or transport, you know? So that's what I'm interested in, you know, a way to make music that also heals, that can also be healing towards me every time I listen to it, you know, or that can send me back to a time with my father, you know, that has passed away. So it's like, it's seeing music and sound as a new form or an original form of technology, you know.
I think that's cool? A good place to end.
All right, cool.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
There is going to be a microphone roaming around this room if any participants have questions for Kame. Did we cover everything?
Hello, I'm OG Lullabies. I'm from Washington, D.C.
Oh, awesome. So we're from the same state.
We are. This isn't a question. This is just me. I psychically knew we would meet one day.
What?
And yes, because someone randomly sent me a link on Instagram. People are always sending me links. But anyway, I just want to say thank you, because when I stumbled upon you, it gave me clarity in my own philosophies and spirituality, and how to connect that in my music and my voice, and how to respect the silence of my politics, and also respect when I feel like elaborating or being particularly vocal about, you know, how I feel in America as a Black woman producer and instrumentalist. So just infinite thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and congratulations on being selected to be, you know, one of these artists to be a part of this project. That's really cool.
Yes.
What's your artist name?
I'm OG Lullabies. It means zero gravity lullabies.
Cool. And do we follow each other?
No, but
send me a message. I want to check you out.
We did Always On. You did Always On with Moogfest.
Oh, yeah.
And I did it too. And I was like, we're like almost there. Because I knew that it would connect all the way eventually. And also, like, King Britt has been reaching out and like giving me lots of awesome advice, and he's
cool.
also the triangle that's going to be in the trine when we,
Okay.
like, yeah,
Already-
so like, okay, all
Cool.
right.
Well, looking forward to meeting you again.
Yeah,
And chilling.
totally, yeah.
Any other questions? If there are no others, then, or if you're maybe too shy to ask it now, then maybe come up to Kume afterwards. Thank you.
Also, shout out the Sneaks. They're incredible artists. I'm so happy that they're here. Like, get to know them. If you don't, you're like gonna be lamer. That can happen at these things, okay? So it's an opportunity, but you can leave lamer, all right?
All right, let's get another round of applause for Moor Mother. Thank you.